So today I'm going to talk a little bit about Udemy, where user research plays, or UX research plays, because I think that helps set this up a little bit, give you a little bit more of an understanding of where we were as a business when we started mixing and matching foundational research methods, go into, okay, what is mixing and matching foundational research methods, and also give you a little bit of actionable steps that you can take to start doing that in your own organization, if that's something that you're interested in doing. So just start off, amazed how many of you guys know of Udemy. That's wonderful. For the few in the audience who doesn't know what Udemy is, it is an online learning platform where anyone can learn and anyone can teach, and we try to really match the right teacher and learner with each other for best maximum effect. So what makes us unique from other companies is that we are just a platform. So we don't control any of our own content. We have some, baseline quality metrics that we try and bring in, make sure things are high quality, but really we're taking the brains and the voices of people around the world who want to share their knowledge and letting them, giving them a place to host that information so that we can share it with all of our 20 million students around the world. So it's really exciting. It makes it for a very dynamic place to do research. We have 30,000 instructors. We have 20 million students in 192 plus countries around the world. And right now we have 65,000 courses. So there's a lot of content. There's a lot of interesting dynamics between these different spheres. For the purposes of the talk, I'm primarily going to talk about the student experience, just to give you guys that preamble. And with regards to where does research fit within this whole world, we are actually a dedicated function. So we sit parallel to product managers, designers, and analytics, actually, all under the product organization. So I know that was a topic of conversation in the panel of where does research fit. We've kind of set ourselves aside as sort of a little island who can serve primarily the product team. Product design and pairs work together, but also anyone else in the organization. So it gives us a really great chance to bring our findings about the users to anyone and make it for anyone, which is wonderful. We use a very mixed methods approach, as you'll see in some of the research methodologies that I talk about. And an important framing, at least in my perspective, to give you a sense of where we were when we started this foundational research project, is that we were a team of one, me, when we started doing foundational research at Udemy and grew to a team of 2 by the time we established the framework. So very small team. It can be done. It is hard, but it definitely can be done. I also wanted to plug my team is growing. If any of you want to move to Dublin, Ireland, yes, we are hiring a user researcher there, so please hit me up, let me know. So the challenge when we started developing this foundational research framework is that I came into the company, I was kind of assessing the lay of the land, getting an understanding of the situation and what exposure people had to research and data and insights. And I found that every department was responding to different types of information. So one, data set did not speak to the marketing team the same way that it spoke to the product team. The analytics team was getting something different out of it. And so no one was sort of singing to the same song sheet in terms of what pieces of information they were taking from a study, which can be a big challenge for research. And so my goals when I started embarking on doing some of these more foundational pieces, the personas, the jobs to be done, the journeys, was to first and foremost create a unified narrative of who these users are. And bring that understanding to the entire company. So I really wanted to create this holistic understanding and use that as a means to potentially drive company strategy. So it's great to be a part of a company where anybody can be a user, anyone can be a learner, anyone can be a teacher. That's wonderful, but if you build for anyone, you don't build for anyone. You end up building this very generic product that can't really be maximized in any one place. So I saw this as an opportunity to say, hey, research can help drive this agenda and help us really focus on that one user group. And once you set upon, hey, this is the user group we're gonna build towards and we're gonna work for, really think through the holistic experience that that group needs to be successful and to have the best possible experience on the platform. So those were kind of my 3 goals in setting out and building this foundational research framework. And when I started, we started with the persona, because that's what people know. You know, that's the most historical foundational research piece that we have. It was starting to be a topic of conversation in the company at the time. When I started on personas, I did not think I was going to be building a foundational research framework, let me tell you that. And so what we were really trying to do with the personas is find sort of that average sentiment of learning. So, you know, learning is something that's super foundational and core to who people are and how they self-identify. So for us, personas are actually relatively stagnant. They don't change all too frequently because that's, you know, something that when you're 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, you decide what learning is for you, and that carries you forward through most of your life. So we started with the persona. Again, it was actually already in progress when I joined the company. It was a traditional concept. The designers were like, hey, we should do personas. We should know who we're building for. Duh. And decided to actually start that from a quantitative perspective. So I know Andrea was talking about different types of personas earlier, and ours was really driven from behavioral and demographic segmentation. So our company, before I joined, had never really had exposure to qualitative research. And so they were comfortable with data. They were not comfortable with words and stories, and that's just the space we were playing in. And so I decided to leverage that and start with the market research segmentation and layer on the qualitative components. So really start with, okay, what are the, you know, very descriptive behaviors that they're doing? How often do they highlight? How often do they take notes? How often do they purchase learning materials? You know, what is their previous level of education, and all of those sorts of things. And then layer on the, you know, where do they see this fitting into their entire worldview and all of the rest of the attitudes and psychographics that come with that. So we did this great work. It was wonderful. We had these beautiful bios that we made that combined some of that qualitative insight and the quotes and the data as well. And we actually got the entire executive team to agree on one persona that was going to be our target, which for me was like a huge break, and really got them to focus that conversation. That was great. Not the entire company. The entire company did not buy in. So you were still speaking to, you know, the marketing team thought it was awesome. They were like, this is great. This is something that we can build a brand around. And so if anyone has seen our brand launch that happened in October, we did a rebrand, and it was largely based on this persona work. That's great. The product team, the design team, we're still having a hard time connecting what is the, how does someone's innate belief in learning translate into their experience on Udemy in that moment. So they had a very hard time. There was sort of this gap of understanding for them. And so I was like, well, crap, like that didn't work. And so kind of went back to the drawing board. Around this time, we actually had a product manager from intercom.io join the company, which is largely based on jobs to be done. I think their entire company strategy is actually based on jobs to be done. And he said, hey, this thing is great. And all of the PMs started talking about it, and they're like, hey, we should do this, we should do this. And I was like, well, if you guys want a research format, we will do this new research format. And so I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose the personas, though, because we already had one piece of the company that's speaking to personas, right? Don't want to lose that, but you want to bring this other group along with you. And so it took me months to sort of think through this and, you know, what are these different components? How do they work together? And what I came to understand is that, yes, the attitude is huge. The attitude about learning and how you interact with it is hugely important. That persona is very core, right? But within a person's life, within this persona's life, that will dictate what are those specific situations in which someone may turn to learning or they may not. So we have some personas who are all about learning, and that's all they do. And we have some personas who will only do it if you put their job on the line and say, you have to get a certain number of credentialing hours in order to, you know, keep your job. So there are people who will not learn for fun. So you have all these different people with different experiences and different expectations about what learning can bring to them. And so what I decided to do was to wrap jobs to be done under the persona's umbrella. And use that as a mechanism to describe those key points in time and those key situations that a person may find themselves in where learning is important and they might turn to Udemy. So for those of you who are not quite familiar with jobs to be done, I know it's a term that I've heard a lot of UXR people talking about here, but it's basically the concept of when you're in a situation and you want to reach a form of progress, you often hire, in the jobs to be done parlance, you hire a product or a service to help you get there, right? So in the case of this discrete moment in time, the learner or the person may hire learning, and therefore they may hire Udemy to help them achieve that sense of progress and to get over that hurdle, to start their new company, as Alec was mentioning before. So the jobs to be done is great because it really focuses on a specific situation, right? It really focuses on that cause and effect of, I need to learn, I turn to this product, why is that happening? And so it gets both into the what are they doing, they're switching, they're moving from one product to another or from one state to another. And the why they're doing it is somewhat rooted in who they are as a persona, but it's also rooted in that particular moment. And so for us, it's really nice because it marries the two concepts pretty well, and it lets us still focus on that key target persona, but also recognize the variability that exists within it. Our target personas still has 5 or 6 different reasons that they commonly come to Udemy to learn. And so that gives us a lot more flexibility. And so now what we've been able to do is further refine how we think about that target persona and focus on, okay, those 1 to 2 key moments. Like, let's get hyper-focused on that, knock that out of the park, and then we can start to bring in some other jobs. Then we can start to bring in some other personas and other types of people. But first, let's do it right by one group. So that's great. The but at the bottom of the slide is that it did not give us a great sense. We have sort of these whys, right? But it did not give us a great sense of what is happening when they come to our product and how well are we meeting their needs? How well are we performing to that moment and helping them achieve that progress? So that's when we brought in the journey. So when a student decides, okay, I'm going to learn, I like learning, I have a reason, I'm going to learn, they have an experience on the platform, right? And depending on that context, depending on who they are as a person, depending on that innate belief in or lack of belief in learning, they're going to have a very different experience, right? So if you come in and you're like, oh, I'm really stressed. My boss said I did something horribly. I know I need to learn something. You're not going to have the likelihood that you have a good experience on any product is probably pretty low because you're so in your head and you already have these perceptions and these, external factors that are weighing you down. If you're already excited and you're jazzed about this cool new thing that you heard about at a conference, then, you might learn something. It might be a better experience for you to learn that thing. So we use the customer journey to really establish that baseline of experience, to really understand where are those points of high, those points of low, and to further focus the product managers and designers on building and prioritizing those points of low so that we can bring up the total average experience of the user on our product. So what I love about tracing this both down as I've been sort of describing it, but also back from that moment and that experience on the product is you can understand what is happening with that and have it still be connected to that why. Why are they having a negative experience? And it's partially their background and partially how they think about learning and products and things like that. But it's also partially about what we are doing or not doing well on our product in the moment. So for us, this has been a hugely powerful tool to really think about how attitudes, so that persona, shapes the situations that you find yourselves in and the reasons why someone might come and learn on Udemy, which in turn determines that experience. So if you again, are in a great frame of mind and you love learning, the likelihood that you have a good experience is really high. If you are put on a performance improvement plan by your boss and you're told you have to learn and that's not your natural inclination, you're going to have a bad time. And so thinking through it in those sorts of dimensions, I think, has really helped us both refine our focus, but also bring greater understanding and empathy to our user experience. So again, Here's the whole piece. You're going from the persona to a single job to be done, and then focusing on that unique customer journey. Theory, awesome. Let's look at a hypothetical. So I made one up for you guys, and this is what a persona slide, this is actually basically the slide. I just copy and pasted, made some stuff up. But this is what we would present as a persona. So let's say we have this new wave entrepreneur. It's this person, similar to what I've heard Alec talk about at various points in the weekend, is, I have to learn quickly so that my company doesn't fail. Very distinct persona. It's a very driven, self-motivated persona. They focus on professional learning. They don't have time for personal stuff, right? If you're building up a business, the likelihood that you have extra time is probably pretty low. And some of the key values that may come out of this persona is that they value expediency. So that quick win could be huge. Practical application. If I learn something and I can't use it, it's pointless. It's a waste of my time. So that could be, a particular value. They really like that bang for buck. If you're bootstrapped in it, then you probably don't have a lot of cash to spend. So that's going to be a huge sort of persona driver. In this made-up, we also put in some fake demographics and said, hey, it's new wave. All the women are doing it. It's awesome. And it over-indexes in our catalog on women taking, business and mentorship, business, entrepreneurship, and marketing courses. So let's say we have this persona. We present it, everyone's bought in, that's great, it's going to be our focus. Then it's time to look at the jobs to be done. So if you think about sort of the life cycle of, let's say, this new wave entrepreneur, there are going to be different hurdles or different moments when she realizes, I need to learn something. So maybe it's, I hate my day job. I want to be my own boss. What does that take? So I might go down and start to do some learning in that avenue. Maybe it's, you know what? I want to be my own boss. I have made this decision. I'm going to quit my day job, and I'm going to start, learning what it takes to actually do the thing, and starts on that new wave of learning. And maybe the company is successful. It's great. She starts to absorb new skills as the company grows. She goes from being, the everything to starting to do more scaling of her operations and learning new things that way. So there could be these distinct moments in her life when learning becomes possible. So let's take one. Let's say she decides to quit her job. What would happen if she found Udemy? And this is what the journey could look like. You might start out sort of, excited. I quit my job. This is great. But I'm also a little apprehensive. What if this doesn't work? How will I know if I can learn the new skills? That sort of thing. So you're kind of hovering in that middle between happy and sad. Maybe you're on Facebook. You're trying to see, okay, who else learns things? How do they learn things? You see an ad. She's like, great. This is awesome. They know exactly what I need. Point of high. It's awesome. And then goes through and comes onto Udemy and sees that we actually have 30,000 courses on entrepreneurship. Whew. We don't actually have 30,000 courses on entrepreneurship. But maybe it's a lot. And she gets a little bit overwhelmed or like, hey, what if I chose the wrong one? I have this bang for buck thing where I don't have a lot of money and I have to learn something. How do I make sure it's the right thing? And so it starts to waver. All of a sudden chooses something. It's like, all right, you know what? We're going to go for it, and is able to build that business plan and has a phenomenal experience. Comes back again, super energized. So you can see where this person and sort of who she is, how she thinks about learning, can really have an impact on the overall situations in which she might decide, hey, I want to learn something. So, you have you hate my job, I'm going to learn something. I'm building a new business, I'm growing a business. Those are all very distinct experiences, and you're going to want different things out of your product at each of those points. So that's what her sort of framework would look like, if you will. So again, going from persona, jobs to be done, journey. I think I've hammered it home enough. So how do you get started? What are the things you need to think about as a researcher, as a product designer, as a product manager going through this process? I think the researcher adage of "it depends" is very applicable here. So I'm going to give you just sort of another framework and different things you can sort of check for yourself to see, where do I get started? How do I get started? Is this right for me? So the first one I think is very important is self-assessment. So I don't believe in doing research without someone else caring about the research. For me, especially coming up from starting a research group and being the one person serving over 100 people in the company, you have precious time. You need to make sure you're doing this for a good reason. So I always do the gut check of, am I doing this just for me? Am I doing this just because I'm curious? Or is there an actual business application? I know Lindsay was harping on that earlier. I think business application is hugely important. So making sure that exists and you're checking your own biases, I think is very important. The next step is stakeholders. I think stakeholders are the single most important part of my job. Making them, building those relationships, making sure you have people in your corner, I think is hugely important. As I know it was mentioned in the enterprise talk, if people are able to come to that today. And what I try to think about when I'm thinking about stakeholder assessment is thinking about what do they want? What do they need? And oftentimes I'll actually do my own research on my stakeholders. So I'll go and I'll talk to them and I'll say, hey, how are things going? You know, how has research been serving you? What can we do better? And listen for the words that they say and really think about, okay, are they talking about needing more in terms of attitudes? Are they talking about needing more in terms of situations that people are in? Are they needing more information talking about that experience itself? And being very intentional, thank you. Very intentional about what area they are interested in, because that will give you a great sense of direction in terms of where you need to go in that sort of pyramid. And then comes the strategic buy-in. So you do this, stakeholder assessment, you figure out what do they need, what do they want. You make sure you have someone in your corner. I think stakeholders, I said, are important. It's also important that you get the right stakeholders in your corner. So look at the political dynamics within your organization or within your agency relationship and think through, okay, this person loves research. They're willing to go to bat for me, but are they the person that other people listen to? Or are they, sadly, sometimes can be the case, the person that no one listens to? Because making sure you have the right alliances is hugely important, especially for this kind of foundational research that takes a lot of time. You have to get the whole company on board. You have to make sure it's there from the outset. So getting strategic buy-in is hugely important. And then do a research assessment. Okay, you've done your own gut check. You've gut checked with your stakeholders. Yes, they still want it. You have someone on your side. We'll figure out where do you start. So going back through old archives of research, if you have Airtable, awesome. We have a giant wiki on Confluence with all of the research we've ever done, and it's very overwhelming. But understanding what you know is very important, because that will give you a great sense of where to start. So if you've done, let's say, usability tests over the course of your product, and you have a really great baseline of information about how users are feeling at different points in your product experience, great. Maybe you can construct the backbone of a journey, and it'll take a couple weeks to fill in. Awesome. What if you've already done the persona work? Okay, well then what next? So really don't start from scratch is all I'm saying. Start from something that you know and work from there. And then sort of the last big, probably the biggest one, and maybe the one I should have started with, is resource assessment. So making sure you have the time. This can take months sometimes to do this kind of big research. So making sure you have the time, making sure you have the incentives to do it right and to make sure you can get good quality participants, to make sure you have the people power and the brain power, enough researchers to really do a lot of interviews. Do you need to hire an outside consultant? Do you need to do this all in-house? What does that look like? I think is a very important thing to take stock of before you actually start doing this kind of research yourself. So that's kind of the bulk of what I wanted to talk about. I do want to thank the Rewired group. If you guys haven't looked into them, they do have amazing resources on jobs to be done. We actually brought them in as consultants to help us execute jobs to be done the first time, and they were fabulous. I think my company had gotten sick of hearing me talk, and sometimes you need to bring the fun uncle in when you're sick of hearing the parent. So that was a great break and a great way to get more additional strategic buy-in from a very high level on this kind of research. So highly recommend it, and big thanks to them. And then lastly, feel free to reach out. I love talking about this stuff, clearly, I'm here. So I would love to hear how it's going in your organization and what you're doing with it and how it's going for you. So please reach out. And that's it.